I'm using this concept, and that is, if you decide to make a non-kosher wedding, will you have a rabbi tell you, hey, I don't think you should have a non-kosher wedding. I would not officiate at your wedding if it was not kosher? Could that happen? Sure. That's also, in some synagogues, it's in the standard protocol. A rabbi won't officiate at a wedding that's not kosher. Let me ask you this. What if someone decides to put a mechitza down the middle of the wedding hall? In a generation where yet we didn't do such things. And the rabbis, nobody asked me, they just did it on their own. If the rabbi would walk into that wedding hall and say, Moshe, I want you to take down this mechitza, what would happen then?
What do you know?
They'd run him out.
They'd run him out of town.
Yeah.
This is only the last 30 years.
No, it's more than 30 years.
Well, I remember going to weddings in the same community where there was never a mechitza.
You're right. In the last 30 years, more people have been doing such things.
And then all of a sudden, the synagogue where I was, and then this other synagogue, all the weddings had the mechitza, and men and women at separate tables eating.
So my war is not on the mechitza. My question is, where is rabbinic leadership in terms of not telling people, I know, the rabbi tells people you can't do. Where are they when there are things that the community decides to do on their own that they should not be doing? Because the rabbi foresees that this is the beginning of a very slippery slope into women wearing face coverings in Yerushalayim or whatever other thing. Where was that leadership? These are customs that were developed not with the blessing of the rabbis of the community, but in communities where no one cared what the rabbi had to say about the customs they were developing. And we blame people in Borough Park and Williamsburg and Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim for starting all kinds of new trends, and you'd be amazed to know how many of those trends have caught on like a wildfire with nobody consulting a competent halachic authority. Because you cannot tell people anymore. That's too religious. Stop. Snap out of it. You can't say that. It's a crazy... What kind of rabbi says that's too religious? Who says that?
It's not religious, it's making it up.
So the Kehillat writes, Asel Harav, make for yourself a rabbi, v'histalek min hasafek, so you could stay away from doubt. Says the Kehillat, the one thing that can destroy a community is people that out of doubt, they start being strict on all kinds of things. Said, make for yourself a rabbi who knows how to tell you, stop being so holy. The Kehillat writes this.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, I understand. It's not real holiness. The moment we lost that control over a community is the moment that Judaism went spinning out of control.
What about those communities with the big Rabbis?
That are not halachic authorities?
Right. We've
That's
talked
a new
about
trend, by
community
the
of
way.
state, where Shalom Din was. That community is a fine example of that.
Correct. Well, so there you have a community in which, that's already a community of people who their rabbi included thinks that being extreme is a good thing.
Mhm.
This is so not traditional to Judaism, nor to Ashkenaz. It's not an Ashkenazi thing. That's like a neo-Hasidic spin-off. The Baal Shem Tov went from purposely making the least kosher sukkah he could build. That was one of his big opinions. They have to have the least kosher sukkah you could have to not embarrass the other people in town who have less kosher sukkahs than you. And that went from being, I want to have the most kosher sukkah, probably could be. So that's clearly not, even though they are part of the Hasidic movement, it's not representative of original Hasidic values. So I'm not going to get into this, but in Sephardic countries, most of them, I'm talking most, I mean Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Turkey for sure, the Balkan region, Iraq, absolutely, Iran, I'm not sure about, Egypt, Syria, what I'm going to say held true in all of those countries. You couldn't be strict without the permission of the rabbis of that generation. When Rav Masas walked into the synagogue and saw somebody wearing a talit over his head, and he felt that was a stringency that only Torah scholars should do, he would literally take off that man's talit, not ask him questions. His job wasn't just to tell you, hey, go put on some clothes in the Beit Knesset, but also you're not allowed to wear that. Rav Masas himself writes, when he was young, he started wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. And one of the elders of the community came up and said, I want you to notice, in the whole synagogue, of rabbis, of tzaddikim, of kabbalists, of poskim, you're the only one who's doing this. You know what kind of message you're sharing to the community? You're holier than everybody else. And he did not wear Rabbeinu Tam tefillin until maybe a few decades later, when he already was living in Israel and he was in a community where that was a norm. We lost that grip on the Jewish community. There is no, and the Rabbis of the world, by the way, since you brought it up, The Rabbis of the world, for the most part, are not halachic authorities. I had a strong conversation with the Chassid once. If your Rebbe is not the posek of the community, so what exactly is a Rebbe?
He's a
And
spiritual
he said,
leader.
you're too Lithuanian for me, he tells me. I said, I'm not Lithuanian at all, just so you know. There's nothing Lithuanian about me. But I said, the definition of a rabbi is one who is moreh horaot, who gives halachic rulings. If you're telling me that your Rebbe cannot render halachic decisions, or chooses not to be in charge of that part of his Hasidic group, I said, then he's an irresponsible leader of a community. What is spiritual in Judaism if not our halachot?
Yeah.
You're a spiritual leader of what?
The main thing.
Exactly right. That's what everyone says. They're a spiritual leader, not a
Right.
halacha is our spiritual infrastructure. That is what makes a system. If the Rebbe cannot tell his Hasidim don't do X or don't do Y, so what authority does he really have? And this model that now exists in most communities, this is already not an Ashkenazi Sephardi thing, this is a Jewish thing. It's a Jewish epidemic, and that is rabbis don't have control over the new trends in their communities, not the ones that go taking away from Shulchan Aruch, but the ones who are adding to Shulchan Aruch. It's a normal thing already in the synagogue to have people who think that they are more observant than the rabbi. And I just think they'll do things that are stringencies that the rabbi doesn't do. In olden times, those people would be excommunicated from the Jewish community. You want to do stringencies, so go find yourself a community that allows you to do it. But not in a community where people don't do it, you don't have that right.
But there are stringencies you could do privately, right?
Perhaps, with the consultation of a Torah scholar.
Gotcha, yeah.
You can't, that's not a decision that an individual is allowed to make on their own.
It's a stringency, and you're adding, so then it's not permitted.
And in this situation, everything has to be weighed in the proper scale. And even rabbis are not all competent enough to make those kind of calls. But this is a situation in which today the Jewish problem that you're looking at is anarchy. It's anarchy of the Jewish community. And I'll tell you, I had this conversation recently with a Guna rights activist. There's a terrible problem in the Jewish community. That is, there are women who are trying to get divorced,
Yeah.
and men that won't give their wives gets.
Yeah.
You know, there's a problem the other way too, but that problem perhaps has more solutions to it than the Guna problem the other way.
It was like this for a long time.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Oh.
This is a modern Jewish problem. There were always the concept of an aguna. But it's the first time where a community who has essentially taking away every shred of authority that any rabbi has ever had, and then demanding from the rabbis to have authority over their community to force men to do something. I mean, who was it that handicapped the rabbis in the first place? The Jewish community who created anarchy, who does things without asking, who thinks they have the right to do whatever they want, or to find their own rabbi who tells them that they can do something. That's the community that created a problem in which you'll have a dayan who has zero authority over the life of the people in his community. And therefore, how do you want him to force someone to give a get? He can't even force you to keep kosher. He can't force you to come to shul. He can't do anything. He has no authority. You've broken the system and now you're demanding solutions from a broken system. The system is broken. The problem of agunot is not unique to agunot. It's the most devastating because it really destroys people's lives. But you're dealing with an entire rabbinic infrastructure that is handicapped, that has no true authority. In fact, ironically, in the recent debate about whether women can be rabbis or not, one of the big cards that the opponents of this trend pull out is the Rambam says that a woman should not be in a position of authority over men. Okay, for whatever, I'm not teaching this halakha now. And the response back was, in which La La Land do you live, that being the rabbi of a synagogue is a position of authority. There are more people with more authority in the synagogue than the rabbi. The wealthy people, the president of the board, the one who hired the rabbi in the first place, the sitting chairman of the sisterhood who can call out the rabbi on his comment about the mechitza, whatever it would be. You might be familiar with some synagogues that are different than that, that's fine. But the running model in the United States is that the rabbi is pretty much allowed to do only certain things that he was pre-selected to do in the first place. And is it really a position of authority? In the olden days, when a man wouldn't want to give a get, the rabbi could literally shut down his life. He could not walk into a minyan and pray. Jews, of all the walks in the community, would not even say shalom aleichem to him. We would boycott his business. We had the right to humiliate him publicly. The Beit Din could beat him and force him to give a get if they felt that was warranted. I'm not condoning violence to Gittin, this is a big problem recently. But the Beit Din had absolute control over the situation. And now we're demanding from the Beit Din system, who we took away their entire authority, and maybe rightfully so. It could be we had too many corrupt Beit Dins that we decided, forget it, we don't want to deal with them and their problems. But what do you want? Then what's the solution? This is what we've destroyed the rabbinate's power, not the chief rabbinate, the rabbis' power in their communities. It's okay today to say, oh, the rabbi of the town, he said something, but I come from a yeshiva, and my yeshiva, they say, great, in your yeshiva, you do whatever you want. You come back to the community, you follow what the rabbi says, and the other way around. You can't go to yeshiva and say, oh, my rabbi in San Diego tells me, sorry, your rabbi in San Diego, this is not his jurisdiction. You know where you see this clearly? In the Israeli army. He's the chief rabbi of the Israeli army. And he makes halachic decisions. And there are certain Rosh Yeshiva that send their students to the army and say, well, it doesn't make a difference what the chief rabbi of the army says. You still, in the army, disobeying command from the chief rabbi is like disobeying command from the officer or the general, the lieutenant, whoever gave that order.
Wow.
In the army, you must do what the chief rabbi of the army says. When you go home to your parents for Shabbat, do whatever you want. But in order to have a functional military, you have to have order. And then you go to a question of, so can everyone become a rabbi? Who is standing on watch, on guard, to make sure that not every Joe Schmo who went to yeshiva for 10 months gets a certificate of being a rabbi? It used to be that title was held very strictly by people who were trusted by the community to watch over this position, because if you put the wrong person in this kind of authority, you'll destroy the entire Jewish people. But today everybody gets smicha. Today everybody mean, oh, I have smicha too. And they're right, they're not lying to you. I almost sometimes think I should give up the title, and go with another title. It's harder today to be a doctor than to be a rabbi. So I'll go for another name. Why? Just that there's nobody watching over who has this kind of control, and therefore the entire system is broken. The bottom line is, with a broken system, you can't fix anything, but you'll see a Judaism that is utterly destroyed.
I told you a couple years about this movie called The Get, which was about a Moroccan
Correct.
community, and in the end, the husband refuses to give his wife a get, and keeps coming with these reasons, and it makes the rabbis look really impotent, no power. And at the end, they agree to the man's demand. He'll divorce her if she promises never to marry somebody else again or be with another man again.
So this
That's not allowed.
and not allowed in halakha.
I know.
It's a nice movie,
Yeah.
but it's not.
But it was,
The whole concept of a get, the word the Torah uses, the word get is not mentioned in the Torah. The word mentioned in the Torah is,
Rabbinic in origin.
do you know what it's called? A sefer kritot. Like, what does karet mean? When a person-
to separate, to cut off.
It's literally cut off from the Jewish people. So when we would say, this person who eats on Yom Kippur, the Torah says, "V'nichrata nefesh ha'im mikerav ha'amad." The soul will literally be chopped off from the rest of the Jewish people. So the same thing with a person who gives a get. A get cannot have conditions that continue after the giving of a get, because if so, then nothing was ever cut off. It has to, all ties must be severed. And even the financial arrangements that exist towards children, those are done in a very specific manner to ensure that that's not something that keeps being toyed with afterwards. If a man says, I'll divorce you on condition that you'll never move back in with your family, that get's not kosher. You don't have the right after you divorce somebody to make such a demand. So that movie was I think the point was taken. The point was about the process and the Beit Din and the helplessness in that entire process, the vulnerability in that process. The actual halachic side could have received a little more guidance.
You saw it
from
finally?
No, but I've heard enough about it, read through enough material about it, and that halachic guidance would have been good to make the final habitable in that story. But you're dealing with a broken system. When the system is broken, I'm not talking about an establishment, but individual rabbis. It's a broken situation. And you'll be surprised. I've been around a few times in yeshiva, and I ask people, if the Rosh Yeshiva would come to your wedding and say, take down the mechita, what would you do? But they wouldn't listen to him. Yeah, but he's your Rosh Yeshiva. What he says, I won't do the wedding. He says, good, we have 10 rabbis come to the wedding, we'll find somebody else. That approach, so he's not really your Rosh Yeshiva. He's your Rosh Yeshiva when it's convenient for you. When you like the things he says, you'll rally behind him. But when not, you'll do whatever you want. The mechita is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. It's a fact that, and this is where you mentioned, so why do so many people do things inside of synagogues? I don't think they ever bother to ask. And the rabbis are helpless in stopping the trend, so it's already become okay. Why? The Sfaradim do it, so you can rely on them. And that's right, we do it. You can rely on us, but goes against Ashkenazi principles when it comes to weddings in the first place.